AP Literature friends. Kristian Kuhn coming at you again for a writing workshop, affectionately known as the Bob Ross of Composition. And up my sleeve today, I have FRQ1 from the 2023 exam, Alice Cary's Autumn. And what I'll do in the fashion of Bob Ross is start with an empty canvas, and I will fill it completely up from start to finish with my heuristics for the introductory paragraph, the body paragraphs, and the conclusion paragraph. So at the end of the video, students, you will have an absolutely clear sense of how to cobble this essay together. And it's not just this particular one for Alice Cary's Autumn, but every FRQ1. And then you're going to see in my other videos that the heuristics I use for FRQ1 are the same I use for FRQ2 and for FRQ3. So you can write the whole exam with two heuristics, right? It completely demystifies things for you in that regard. So let's jump right in and dissect this prompt together. So it says, in Alice Cary's poem Autumn, published in 1874, the speaker contemplates the onset of autumn, right? So that's going to be our theme. Read the poem carefully, then in a well-written essay, analyze how Cary uses literary elements and techniques to convey the speaker's complex response to the changing seasons. And that's common fare for the College Board. There's absolutely nothing tricky in this prompt. We know that we just have to perform literary analysis from top to bottom. Focus on the terms, the devices, the techniques. As you read the poem, go hunting for everything that you see in it and make sure it makes its way into your analysis, your written analysis. So let's begin. Let's ask ourselves the question. So, how do I write the introductory paragraph? And let me explain this a little bit in terms of my adage of you gotta Bob Ross your instruction. So students, I know that in your life you've had teachers who assign writing, right? You'll read like Macbeth for 6 weeks and they're like, all right, on your mark, get set, go, write an essay. We've read it for 6 weeks. You know everything that you need to know. And you're like, dude, how do I write the essay? Right? And it becomes a guessing game. What does teacher want? And when I teach writing in the manner of Bob Ross, you'll know exactly what you need to do because I'm going to model it for you several times. I'm going to use a heuristic, just like Bob Ross used the wet on wet technique. And it completely takes the lid off the essay so that you can see the internal machinations of how to piece this together. So again, I'll give you plenty of exemplars and models in terms of how to do this. But here's the thing, I got breaking news for you. I'm going to give you the key to unlock the exam. In the prompt are two implicit questions, right? And if you answer these questions in your introductory paragraph, you're going to guarantee yourselves the thesis point. And then if you write it in the manner in which I'm going to teach you how to write it, you put yourself in contention for the sophistication point as well. So here are the two hidden questions in every FRQ1 and every FRQ2 prompt. The first question is this: what is the author's intent? And the second question is, how does the author construct meaning? So let's break those down. What is the author's intent? Some teachers will talk about exigence, universal theme, universal truth, and then construction of meaning gets us to the use of the terms, the devices, techniques, right? Meanings constructed through all of those things, like the tone, the diction, the syntax, the extended metaphors, the forced rhyme scheme, whatever you see in this particular poem constructs the meaning. But let's really break this down into simpler minutia. So I have two heuristics for my introductory paragraphs, the declarative thesis and the inverted thesis. And I always advise my students to go the route of the inverted thesis. And here's how this works. It's going to be 4 sentences long, and the first 3 sentences answer the first question. What is the authorial intent? So we're going to have 3 sentences of context and background that focus on the universal truthiness of the piece or the exigence of the piece. And then the last sentence is the thesis. Whenever we answer the question, how does the author construct meaning, we arrive at the thesis statement. So we're inverting the thesis. We're going to end with the thesis. Fourth sentence is the construction of meaning sentence. There's other things we got to do in here. We have to sprinkle in some tier 2 level vocabulary. Be your academic best. So use some SAT level caliber words because it is an academic audience. And then sentence constructs. There are 12 sentence types according to Strunk and White. And in my YouTube channel, I have some exercises on helping students break that monotonous rhythm of independent clause, short, simple declarative sentence, short, simple declarative sentence, so that you can write with more nuance, pizzazz, and flair. Right? You got to be able to wield some voice, rhythm, and flow in here and manipulate your sentences at a nice, like, syntactical ninja level, right? So pay attention to how I wield my syntactical maneuvers in here. And let's recap before we look at some exemplars. 3 plus 1. 3, authorial intent. 1, construction of meaning. So here's my first one. In many regards, the changing of seasons is analogous to one's progression through the stages of life, right? That's the whole universal truthiness of this, right? Seasons are life. But there's a simple truth to life. If one stays stuck in the past season or fixated on seasons to come, they invariably miss the present moment, even if that moment just so happens to be a turning point. Life is cyclic, and that there are majestic beginnings and inevitable endings. But one is much happier if they dance with change and embrace its natural ways. Now I'm at the 4th sentence. You can see 3 sentences there of just universal truthiness, right? The authorial intent. Last sentence, I focus on the 2, sometimes 3 most salient terms, devices, techniques in the entire poem. So look at what I focus on here. I think they are the terms, the devices, the techniques that are the glue, the backbone of the whole poem. Alice Cary highlights this theme in her poem Autumn through the personification of the seasons. So you hear that? And the inherent juxtaposition between these seasons and the human condition. So I think personification and juxtaposition are crucial to this poem and comprise the whole thing. Let's talk about vocab. You can see my vocab is up in here, but I'm not sounding like a goon. I don't have this idea that if I use $1 million words that I'm rocking the cash book, but things like analogous, progression, what else do I have? Fixated, invariably. Words like that kind of get you to tier 2. And then look at my sentence constructs. I'm using things in here like dashes, which are very nice. But one thing that I always tell my students is don't parallel your sentence constructs. Pay attention to the sentence you just dropped and have a deviating sentence after that. Don't stack your independent, short, simple declaratives atop each other. And if you do that, if you wield all those things together, you should have some voice, rhythm, and flow. And I think any College Board reader would look at this and say, yup, thesis point most definitely. And if this student can continue to rock at this level, I'm going to give them the sophistication point. And that's what you want to do out of the gate. 4 sentences. Might be a tad bit confusing, so let's roll the tape again and do it all over again. 3 plus 1. It's human nature to be resistant to change, especially when such turning points mark an end to the light of life. Again, start with the truthiness, the exigence. In spite of this, however, nature marches on regardless and gives to every time and season its own unique beauty, whether it be like literal changes such as from summer to fall, or the consideration that the progression from cradle to grave also knows its seasons. Even though the human tendency is to resist change, when one gives themselves over to the sheer beauty and harmony of it all, the inner peace of letting go can be rather liberating. So I'm at the 4th sentence. Again, I'm going to focus on the salient, the germane terms, devices, techniques. It's usually 2. If the piece is particularly juicy, I'll go 3. But don't make it a literary terms dumping ground. So, construction of meaning sentence equals the thesis. Look at this one. Alice Cary arrives at such a place in her poem Autumn through the personification of the seasons and the juxtaposition between the natural cycles of human existence and the cycles of nature. Vocab is up in this one. Sentence constructs are supple and flowing. And again, it's 4 sentences long, 3 plus 1. Students, yes, you can do this. Don't throw your hands up in the air and say, Kristian, this is beyond me. I'm going to do it 2 more times for you. Number 3. The season of autumn comes with its expected sadness because this turn of fate invariably reminds one that they too will one day progress into eternal darkness. Again, that's the exigence. But in knowing that man shares the cyclic bond with nature, most people do not morbidly obsess over the fact that all life has an expiration date. Alice Cary's narrator is one such character in that as long as there is the spark of life, so is there hope that one day spring will return to restore all of its original beauty. And you might be saying, Kristian, where are your terms, devices, techniques? Well, friends, you can imply them. And here's the thing, you got to talk to your teachers about this one. I'm fine with implication, but some AP readers might say, if student did not expressly state the term, they are not going to get the thesis point. So there is a danger in proceeding this way. But all day long, there's a thesis in here. Me personally, my better writers, my better students, I have them imply because you're going to state the terms, devices, techniques in the first premise, which is the heuristic of the syllogistic method, which we'll get to in just a second. But there is a risk in doing this, I will admit it. But nonetheless, 4 sentences, tier 2 sentence constructs. All right, let's revisit this 3 plus 1 in the first manner in which we did it. As summer transitions into autumn, nature seems to remind man of a certain truth. Death is inevitable. In fact, these seasons so closely mirror the natural life cycle of man that man cannot escape this singular and cyclic fate in knowingness. But in spite of this, man has a choice. Accept the passage of time and be at one with it, or resist and lose the battle no matter how valiant the effort. We're at the 4th sentence again. Alice Cary highlights these themes in her poem Autumn through the light and dark imagery and the personification of the season. So I went imagery and personification in this one. All right, so we can pause here. Students, give it a whirl. Show your writing to some other students and your teacher to make sure that you are all good and squared. Next question becomes this, because we still have a ton of canvas left. So, how do I write the body paragraphs? And I've alluded to this. We are going to use the syllogistic method. And it comes from the Aristotelian tradition. Aristotle ran a school called the Lyceum, and the townsboys would go there to learn about polemics, oration, debate, wordsmithing, word wrangling. And he focused on a term called cogency, which just means locked in logic. We in the college board circle refer to that as line of reasoning. So let me give you an example here. It's basically a mathematical calculative formula when you go from premise 1, premise 2 to conclusion. So if I were to say to you, arsenic is deadly, you'd all nod your head and say, Kristian, I'm 100% in accord with you. But if I say premise 2, my dog ate arsenic, you're naturally going to conclude, uh-oh, Kristian, that's not going to bode well for your dog. Your dog is going to die. So how do we turn that into a heuristic for the purposes of writing this paper, doing a literary analysis? Well, the first premise, which is going to be 3 sentences long, is an argument containing the terms, devices, techniques. All right, so it's going to be 3 sentences. The 4th sentence begins at the second premise, and this is where we get quoting and paraphrasing. And we want a teeter-totter balance between the two. We don't want to do one far more at the expense of the other. And then body paragraphs, we need to be mindful of this, need to be concluded. And this is where we throw it all back to the thesis and the prompt. It's an echo, it's a promise, it's a link. So let's look at a first premise. All right, this is how I would begin every single first body paragraph. I'm not big on giving kids words. I want you guys to be able to come up with authentic things. That's why I'm not a big fan of templates. I think templates give you too many sentences, and it's not necessary. I trust you more than a lot of teachers will. I think you can come up with your own, but I do have a 4-word stem, and it's this, right from the onset. Students often ask, where do I begin? How do I begin? And I say, begin right where Cary begins and go methodically through the poem, cross-weave when necessary. So if we do that, I'm just going to go cherry pick the terms, devices, techniques that Cary uses in the beginning of the poem. So look at this. Right from the onset, Cary connects nature's cyclic course to the idea that man likewise undergoes similar phases of change. By correlating the season's darkness to death, she also suggests that it is human tendency to want to resist the inevitability of such changes from life, to dark. So that's the juxtaposition. In many of my introductions, I already said juxtaposition, so I don't want to say it again. So I'm just implying it here. In personifying each of the 4 seasons, Cary furthers the idea that the human condition is inextricably linked to the very same fate of all of life. So again, I'm going to keep my tier 2 up, focus on those sentence constructs still. So if I break this into a promise of the first premise, I got juxtaposition, I could call it binary, dichotomy, it doesn't matter, and personification. By extension, I'm going to be focusing on the themes. So I don't want to do 1 paragraph tone, 1 paragraph syntax, 1 paragraph diction. That's not very good at this stage of the game. So what I do here is I write the first premise and then I go textual support hunting. I need quotes and or paraphrases to demonstrate the juxtaposition and the personification early up top of the poem. This is what's called keeping the promise of the first premise. If I keep the promise of the first premise, I will be cogent and I will have a pretty strict line of reasoning. So 4th sentence begins the second premise, and I got to go quote hunting. I got to go drop some quotes and drop some paraphrases, and I usually do it in the 4th sentence. Immediately drawn upon the juxtaposition of light and dark imagery. It is mentioned that shorter and shorter now the twilight clips the days as though the sunset gates they crowd. As one progresses from the cradle to the grave, and as seasons pass from spring to autumn, there's a literal loss of light. So notice, you quote, you got to analyze it, unpack the quote. With each and every passing day, the season as well as the individual's life force grows more dim. But just like most of mankind himself, the seasons of lightness likewise throw up resistance to change, especially when they save by fits the warmer air deceives, and stealing hopeful to some sheltered bower. She lies on pillows of the yellow leaves, and tries the old man tunes over for an hour. So one thing that I'm doing here that is nice is embedding my quotes. And there's a simple heuristic to do that. I call it the 5-word rule. If a student places a minimum of 5 words before the quote and keeps the quote relatively small, it should sound conversational. Again, we quoted, we have to analyze it, right? Stick to the terms, devices, techniques. That's what we're analyzing. The old tunes are the melodies of spring, a time of young and vibrant life that is merely a memory once the autumn of one's life settles in. And this is the thing. The seasons likewise have memory and want to hold onto the light of happier days. Man and nature steal these numbered days when they come to the end point. And just like the flowers themselves, Man and rose will take off their tire of red. The mullein stalk its yellow stars have lost, and the proud meadow pink hangs down her head against earth's chilly bosom, witched with frost. Just like this rose, man will endure the same fate and shed the spring's bountiful light. All right, so you can see here I have quotes and or paraphrases for the personification and the juxtaposition. But we got to conclude the thought, right? We're not done. Link it all back to the prompt and the thesis. It usually takes 2 sentences. The whole syllogistic body paragraph is going to be 10 to 12 sentences. So no more of those little itty bitty 4 or 5 sentence baggers that students are so prone to write. There's not enough support or analysis in there. So here's the conclusion. Although life is sealed to this singular fate, whether it be a blade of grass, a pesky bug, or a baby born yesterday, the 4 seasons will trace a finger along the lines of the passage of time, and invariably all life will return to darkness. All right, friends, pause here, crank a first premise, use that right from the onset transition if you want to, or come up with something on your own. Go quote hunting. Embed those quotes with the 5-word rule and slap a conclusion on it. But there's still a lot of canvas left. What do we do next? It's easy. Bust out another syllogism. Ask yourself what is left. We're at the middle of the poem, so we have the middle and the end still left. Switch up your terms, your devices, techniques, and there's still quite a bit more juxtaposition and personification left in this. That's pretty much the whole poem. But we haven't done things like tone. We haven't done things like syntax. So get that in the second body paragraph. And as I say here, it's going to be a 4-paragraph essay. Intro, 2 bodies, conclusion. So let's wrap the essay up and take a look at how we can use some conclusion stems. So these are some stems that my students use. And I liken the conclusion to a fireworks display, the grand finale. Hit the big themes again. So you can conclude with simple transitions like this. Simply said, evidentially, in no other words, when it's all said and done, and at the end of the day. So here is one that uses a sentence stem, and it is in a global sense. In a global sense, the passage of life is analogous to the passage of the 4 seasons. From spring to summer, from autumn to winter, life's natural course is to lose the light of life. In spite of the shared fate, however, man's natural impulse is to preserve the light for as long as possible. So again, usually just takes 3 or 4 sentences. Here's one without the stems. Ultimately, we want students to get to this point. Kick the training wheels off, remove the scaffolds, and do something a little bit more original in thought. So here's an example for the brave among ye. Entrenched into the DNA of every living thing are the seasons. No matter what it is, the 4 seasons will literally and figuratively touch the course of every living path, all the way until the final speck of life gets snuffed out. But for as long as there's life, most of nature will hold strong to the lighter, warmer days. All right, that's it, my friends. Happy teaching, happy writing, and if you want to reach out to me with any questions, comments, concerns, you can drop me an email at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. Also know I'm a lead teacher for the National Writing Project, present often for the College Board and NCTE, and I own a tutoring company called Write at IB Write. So students, if you want help with your college personal statements or want to really crush a 5 on the AP exam, then drop me an email and we can talk about some of the services that I offer. Happy to work with you. So I always have a heavy slate of students that I have on my docket that I'm working with, and I have a really good success rate of getting kids to not just qualify, but crush the AP exam and write some killer personal statements. So that's it from here. Be well, do well, and I'll see you in the next writing workshop.